Hello everyone, Antoni here, and I just came home from watching Verdi's Don Carlo, which was shown at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Now, I really love Don Carlo. It is actually one of my most favorite operas by Giuseppe Verdi, aside from Aida, Il Trovatore, La Traviata, Rigoletto, Otello, Il Trovatore, and Nabucco, and of course Macbeth. But if I were to rank Don Carlo compared to the other operas that I've mentioned, I'd have to say that Don Carlo comes out on top. It's number one. And it's simply because of great music and an interesting plot, a very intriguing plot that revolves around politics, love, betrayal, and many other heavy stuff here and there, especially when it comes to the church and the state. So, technically speaking, if you were to pull off Don Carlo very, very well, you need to have six great singers of the highest caliber. So, with Don Carlo, you need a dramatic tenor who can make the best out of such an unthankful part. And he also needs to be a convincing actor. He needs to convey all of his angst, his anger, his passion, and he still has to be quite youthful as well. I mean, after all, he is King Philip's son. Speaking of Philip, if you were to cast any basso who can sing King Philip, he also has to make sure that he's a convincing actor as well. I mean, yes, he does have a gorgeous, velvet, deep, gravelly, dark basso voice, but he also needs to learn how to convey the pain and the suffering and the complexity of this character. The Grand Inquisitor is another basso role. So basically, the Grand Inquisitor kind of has to have a little bit of a heavier, heftier voice than that of Philip. I mean, he's a lot older than him after all. And basically, if you were to put Philip and the Inquisitor hand in hand, you need to have two really great bossos who know how to work off each other, especially in that scene between, Philip and the Grand Inquisitor. It has to convey a lot of emotion between two different individuals, Philip representing the state and the Grand Inquisitor representing the church. So it's a really complex situation that you can simply put two bossos in, and that's actually quite interesting. For Rodrigo, the Marquis of Posa, you need to have a dramatic baritone that not just sings with a very strong voice, but he also has to have moments of lyricism. So, yeah, he does have dramatic moments, but there are times that he can be lyrical. So he needs to balance those two out. And Eboli. Eboli is a very, very interesting character. She has the high notes of a soprano and she has the low notes of that of a contralto, but yeah, basically this is a very challenging female role and it's also quite complex because yes, Eboli is definitely a woman who is so full of fire, passion, love, and of course, jealousy. The jealousy she feels for Elisabetta that Carlo loves her instead of, Eboli. Yeah, basically, if any dramatic mezzo or dramatic soprano were to sing Eboli, then not only does she need to have thrilling, great high notes, but a gravelly, um, low register. and of course, a well supported middle register as well. So basically, it is very challenging. It's up there with Abigail, Lady Macbeth, Azucena, and of course Amneris. It is so up there with these roles. I'd also have to say that it's also quite up there with Lady Macbeth, but Lady Macbeth sings much higher. So yeah, Eboli is a huge trip for any mezzo or dramatic soprano aiming to sing her. That is a huge work for any singer, and that basically proves how tough the role of Abely can be. She sings a lot of A's and B flats, and not to mention she has that high B in Odon Fatale. And I've also noticed that there are mezzos and certain sopranos that sustain that B, and some of them, well, they kind of cut that B. So, yeah, anyone who sings Abely, like I said, needs to have thrilling high notes and actually a uniform register all throughout. So that's a really big challenge. Elisabetta is equally challenging as well. So, yeah, if I could classify her in the German Fach system, she would be a jugendliche dramatische Sopran. In Italian terms, she'd be a spinto soprano or a full lyric soprano. There are moments where she sings lyrically, but there are moments where she has to have these dramatic high notes, and there are times that she has to sing pianissimo, as evidenced by her fourth act aria Tu che le vanità. So, yeah, Don Carlo boasts a very interesting cast of characters in terms of the vocal challenges they have to negotiate. And in terms of music, Don Carlo boasts great music all throughout. From Philip's sonorous, somber Ella Jamai Mamo to Eboli's furious, guilt ridden, passionate Odon Fatale. From Carlo's angsty Io lo vidi to Posa's death scene to Elisabetta's um, grand Duque le Vanità, and even to the scene between um, Philip and the Inquisitor, and also the scene with the monk and the friars. Basically, that's what Don Carlo boasts great music and equally singing of the highest caliber. And I personally have a CD of Don Carlo, which starred Carlo Bergonzi, Renata Tebaldi, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, Grace Bumbry, Nikolai Gyaurov, and Marti Talvela. Unfortunately, it's all the way in Cebu, but still, it's a really nice listen. Now that that's out of the way, on with the review. As always, I have this little booklet of cast and crew so that just in case I forget any names or if I mispronounce any names, I have this as my guide. And I have this program with me so that just in case you want to see certain pictures of the production, then I have this on hand. Okay. The conductor was Donald Runnels, again. The production was by Marco Arturo Marelli. He was also the one in charge of the set design and the lights for this particular opera. The costumes were by Dagmar Niefend, and as always, the chorus master was William Spalding. Now, the production of Don Carlo, in terms of the set design, it's quite minimalistic. There were no trees, hills, rivers, or any sort of ornaments hanging around here and there. Um, it's not like it's bad or anything. I just thought it's quite interesting in its own little way. But instead, they have these like huge walls and pillars. If I could turn to the page of this program, I think they might show it. Um, something like something like this, yeah, something like that. And I think I could find more examples here. Hang on. Yeah, yeah, I think that's the only. Oh, and something like this. This is mainly the scene with Philip, Carlo, the Inquisitor, Eboli, and the townspeople when um, the king and the Inquisitor tell them to kneel before Philip. So, yeah. And there's also a great use of lighting. For example, in the scene between Philip, the Inquisitor, Carlo, Eboli, Elisabetta, and the townspeople, the lights end up in a bright red color, and that's just basically behind them, and it forms like a cross. The walls form like a cross. And with Elisabetta's grand aria, Tutte le vanità, there's like a white light that shines above her, and the overall set color is like a blue hue. And interestingly enough, instead of having an actual offstage voice from heaven, there is a woman who kind of sings all the lines of the voice from heaven. There is a woman, a townswoman, who has a baby with her, and she sings the lines of the voice from above. And the woman has her baby taken away by the priests, and the poor dear ends up being burned on the stake for being a heretic. So that's one thing I thought was really quite interesting with this production. And the one thing that really stands out in terms of the production of Don Carlo were the costumes. The women had such beautiful costumes. Eboli is usually seen in a turquoise blue dress. Elisabetta has a black gown and a white night dress, and her attendants have like this black dress. They all wear black dresses. The men mostly wear black. Um, Philip in his scene Ella Jemima Mo, he wears like a white polo shirt and I think black pants. I wouldn't be too sure. I kind of forgot. But he wears like a white polo shirt and pants. The Grand Inquisitor first comes in wearing gray, but at the scene with Carlo and the townspeople, Philip and the Inquisitor, he wears red, which I thought really suited him a lot more. So, yeah, the costumes really stood out. And another thing I like to note in this production is that there are times that Elisabetta also has her moments with, like, an unspoken governess, which I thought was really nice. I mean, after all, Elisabetta is the queen, and she needs to make sure that she has attendants that um, keep her safe. So overall, a minimalistic set design, but beautiful, beautiful costumes. Now let's get on with the singers. And a lot of these singers I actually know, not really personally, but I've listened to them on YouTube, and of course, I've also listened to them on Spotify, but mostly on YouTube. In the title role of Don Carlo, we have Russell Thomas, who is an African American tenor. I really, really love the quality of his voice as Don Carlo. It is a baritonal, spinto tenor, dramatic tenor voice, and he makes great use of his instrument. When he has to sing soft, he sings so heavenly soft, and his high notes are pure and very, very solid. Basically, he has a very solid technique. There were no wobbles, no setback, and he was a very convincing actor. He was able to portray Carlo's um, angst. He was able to portray Carlo's sadness, his anger, his fury, his passion. He was able to bring out every single emotion on the table and he delivers it beautifully. And he has a really great instrument. He makes great use of his voice and he has an amazing stage presence where you really feel Carlo's vulnerability. He is so torn between um, the church and the state. He's a man who is torn between not just the church and the state, but the love of his father and the love of Elisabetta, who, even though he's the same age as her, is his stepmother, which is really quite surprising because, yes, Carlo and Elisabetta were supposed to be married, but for political reasons, Philip ended up marrying Elisabetta just to settle the dispute between France and Spain. So you really feel for him. Sure, not a lot of people like Don Carlo as a character because he's not really that heroic. He angsts a lot, he whines a lot, yada yada yada. But Russell Thomas as Don Carlo was able to paint a vivid, strong, and clear picture of the Infante. And with a solid singing technique and great acting chops, he is by far actually one of my new favorite tenors of this year. And I'm really glad to hear him live as Don Carlo. So big kudos to Mr. Thomas, and I wish him well in his career. And the Philip for the evening was Hans Peter König, who is a German bass. I really love the timbre of his voice. It is a dark, smoldering, um, black sounding voice. It is well focused in the registers, especially in the lower register, and his presence is intimidating, yet at the same time, you really feel for this man. This is a man that's torn between his power as the king of Spain, his love for Elisabetta, and of course, um, his connections with the church. This is a man you really feel for. And when he sang Ella Jemima Mo, I thought it was heavenly. It was really such a great experience seeing Mr. Koenig sing what I consider one of the greatest Verdi basso arias of all time. And to hear him singing it with such pathos, such beauty, such masculinity, it's really awe inspiring. So there's another great performer in this opera, and he did a very beautiful job, not just in terms of singing, but also he's a very convincing actor. In the role of Rodrigo, the Marquis of Posa, we have Dalibor Yenis, who is Hungarian, and I've actually I haven't really heard a lot of his stuff on YouTube, but as I heard him live, I have to say he gives a very strong portrayal of this free thinking nobleman. He really shows a lot of strength, a lot of courage and passion, and it's also evident in his voice. It is smoldering, it is virile, it is without a doubt one of the most beautiful instruments I've heard in a Verdi baritone, or any or a baritone that specializes in works by Verdi, Donizetti, Puccini, and all the other great composers. So this is someone I really love vocally, and not to mention he's quite handsome as well with his shoulder length long hair and his piercing eyes and that handsome looking goatee. He's really that handsome. And he's sort of like, you know, a magnet. He is very magnetic in his performance as the Marquis of Posa. Words cannot really describe how enthralled I am to have the pleasure of hearing Mr. Dalibor Yenis in such a role. So he does a very commendable job in performing as the Marquis of Posa. The Grand Inquisitor was sung by Albert Pesendorfer, who also sang Banco from Macbeth in the same opera house. Here he gives a really great performance in the role of the Inquisitor. He underplays the Grand Inquisitor, um, sort of. He sort of underplays his evil side, and but he's still a man of power. He has a really great instrument, and his tone is very well focused. In fact, I actually love both Mr. König and Mr. Pesendorfer in their scene together. It's really that magnetic. I really got dragged into the scene because this is really a testament of having two bassos in the same stage singing off of each other, yelling at each other. It's that exciting. And as an actor, he's able to convey um, the Grand Inquisitor's gravitas and how menacing he can be without being so over the top. He sort of underplays it, like I said. He underplays the Grand Inquisitor's mean nature, mean fanatic nature. He underplays that. Instead, we have a man of power, a man of the church. So basically, it's really cool seeing two bassos, two really great German bassos, working off each other. It's really that epic. And he's also a really great performer. Another great performer in this opera. So that's really exciting news. In the role of Elisabetta di Valois, we have Anya Harteros, a name I have always encountered in YouTube and, of course, in the clips I've heard, whether in Spotify or mostly in YouTube. And there are a lot of good things said about Miss Harteros as Elisabetta di Valois. Some people say that she doesn't have such an ideal Verdi voice, but this year she's improved magnificently, and she really has a magnetic stage presence like those of her colleagues. And she's another great performer in this role, and she was able to convey Elisabetta's pain, doubt, and sorrow all throughout the opera. And her big moment was in Tutte le vanità. At the end of the aria, she had the biggest round of applause, and that really shows how much of a great singer Miss Harteros was as Elisabetta di Valois. She had such a lovely, full lyric soprano voice, and she makes great use of her instrument. When she has to sing loudly, she sings it loudly and gives it her all, but she doesn't damage her voice. When she sings softly, it is so heavenly. It's like you have an angel, an archangel, a seraphim singing right before your eyes. So overall, Miss Harteros as Elisabetta di Valois does a very excellent job. The audience loved her. They applauded for her so loudly that it was really such a crowning moment of awesome for her. And I definitely agree. I was drawn in by Miss Harteros' performance of the Queen. It was that beautiful. It was full of pathos, full of life, and just heavenly all throughout. In the role of Eboli, we have Violetta Ormana. A very interesting fact about Miss Ormana: she started out as a dramatic mezzo. Over time, she sang dramatic soprano roles and even some spento soprano roles, but there are times that she has reverted back to her dramatic mezzo roots, therefore alternating her soprano and mezzo soprano performances, like her predecessors Gertrude Lunger, um, Grace Bumbry, Shirley Verrett, Christa Ludwig, Sigrid Kehl, um, and even Isolde Elchlep. Yeah, those singers who have alternated between the soprano and mezzo repertoire. Here, I thought she did a fantastic job as Eboli. Granted, I have watched some clips of Violetta Ormana as Eboli on YouTube, mainly singing Odon Fatale, mostly singing Odon Fatale. And I've also seen some of her clips of her as Amneris, and some of her clips as Isolde, her singing Ortrude's aria, and of course her singing the immolation scene from Götterdämmerung, though with the immolation scene it was an audio clip, which was on YouTube. Still, all I could say is that she is definitely in her element performing the role of Eboli. In fact, it's safe for me to say that I really love Violetta Ormana in dramatic mezzo roles and dramatic soprano roles more than her spinto full lyric soprano roles. I don't really care for her Aida. I don't really care for her Oda Bella. I don't even care for her Amelia from Un ballo in Maschera, nor for her Maddalena from Andrea Chenier. It's roles like Eboli, Amneris, Brunhilde, Kundry, Ortrud, Isolde that really, really make her awesome. And this is pretty much her best night. Her high notes were piercing and really, really thrilling all throughout. And she definitely has a good middle register. But more than anything is those piercing, thrilling, sharp, like a dagger high notes. Wait, more than a dagger, like a sword, a double edged sword of high notes. They're like lightning. And in terms of Ormana's acting, it is so involving. You could see that Awali is a woman scorned. Even though she is loyal to the queen, she has her passions. She is jealous of Elisabetta, especially when she finds out that Carlo is head over heels in love with Elisabetta, more so than with Awali. So basically, Ormana was able to bring out a woman of passion, of jealousy, of anger, of erotic love, and she combines them all in one amazing package. So, a big kudos to Miss Ormana, and frankly, this is the role in which I think a lot of people love her in. Probably more so than Amneris, or even more so than Atsucena. So yeah, I think this is actually one of Miss Ormana's role, best roles, so to say. It is so up there with her Amneris, Isolde, and Kundry. I really applaud her for doing such a fantastic job as Abeli. The audience loved her. At the end of her Odon Fatale, the audience clapped their hands out. They really did. That's how much of a great singer Miss Ormana was in that role. She was that thrilling and full of fire and passion. Where can you go wrong? You can't go wrong with Miss Ormana as Abeli. In the role of the monk, we have Tobias Kehre. He also sang Sarastro in Magic Flute at the same opera house, and I have to say, he makes great use of his instrument. He's another great voice, a great basso voice, and especially when he comes out looking like a white Grim Reaper with like a white cloak and with black hands, and he's reaching out to Carlo, grabbing him to retreat both of them to safety. It's that thrilling of a performance, even though the role of the monk, aka Charles V, is a pretty small role for a basso. He makes great use of his instrument, and frankly, he's also quite involving as an actor as well. So he really has a lot of stamina to put in this small role. And it's a very commendable type of stamina. Now, in the smaller roles, we have Alvaro Zambrano as the Count of Lerma and also that of the Herald. He has a great instrument as usual. He continues to use that great instrument of his. And like I said, his voice has a lyrical, lovely timbre, and he also has a good acting skill as well. He makes the best out of that small role. It's not overplayed or overacted, it's just right. And it's also safe to say that as the Herald, he is an offstage voice, but through the most part, he plays the Count of Lerma, and he plays it with a sort of simplicity that I kind of like. And his voice is really good. In the role of the page boy, Tebaldo, we have Martina Welschenbach, who also sang Pamina from Magic Flute. She, she has her usual light lyrical voice, and I still love that instrument. And she's able to make great use of her small role, especially when she comes in the scene handing the ladies oranges from the basket, and when she delivers that letter to Carlo, she's able to portray the youthfulness of Tebaldo, even though Tebaldo is such a small role. So she's able to make great use of her instrument and is able to make great use of the time given for this character. In the role of the voice from heaven, we have Shaban Stagg. In this particular production, like I said, she is seen as a woman with a baby. And poor thing for the woman, her baby is taken away by the priests, whereas the woman gets burnt. She has a great voice, a great, lovely, lyrical sounding instrument, and her acting as the woman with the baby is also quite heart wrenching as well. So kudos to her. And then with the six deputies of Flanders, the Flemish deputies, we have Ben Wager, Seth Carrico, Michael Rapke, Andrew Harris, Tobias Kehre, and Stephen Barkey. They were all great, masculine sounding singers, and I really love how involved they are in the drama, even though they don't have a lot to sing. They are still well involved in the drama, and it was also quite sad that their characters ended up being shot by the soldiers. But still, They give such amazing performances, and they were in harmony all throughout. The conductor, as I've mentioned, was Donald Runnicles. As always, he did such a commendable job with leading the orchestra and the chorus. Of course, the first act of the first scene could have been a bit slower, but that's just a nitpick. Overall, he did a fantastic job with keeping the tone of the music and making sure that the singers were well um, tuned and everything was great. Everything was spectacular. Special note in terms of this opera, there are times I found myself crying. Well, not like over the top crying, but I was almost in tears whenever I hear the duet between Rodrigo and Carlo, Dio che nell'alma infondere. That pretty much would want to make me cry because it is so beautiful. It is the most beautiful duet for a tenor and baritone. It is that epic. It is it is it makes me feel so speechless singing excuse me, seeing two great singers sing this duet, and it makes me really thrilled. And I'm practically speechless. When I heard that duet, I was almost reduced to tears because it is one of the most beautiful and heart-rendering friendship duets, and even the most epic friendship duets I've ever heard, especially with that of Elisabeth's Tutte le vanità and Eboli's O Don Fatale. Great pieces of music. And overall, I have to say, I had a great evening watching Don Carlo. It is without a doubt the best productions I have seen in the Deutsche Oper Berlin so far. And kudos to all of the singers who gave it their all. Kudos to the conductor. Kudos to the person in charge of the production and set design and the costumes. You all did a magnificent job. And this is an opera I can watch over and over again and even listen to over and over again. It is that timeless. And it really shows that even though it is a huge piece of work for singers, it is without a doubt beautiful. There are a lot of epic moments to be found in Don Carlo, and especially with operas written by Verdi. Well, in my opinion. And all I have to say was that I was very grateful to have been watching this opera, and words cannot really describe how I feel, how much joy I feel after I walked out of the opera house. I knew that right away I had to make this review because, frankly, it was the best experience that I had with the Deutsche Oper Berlin. So kudos to all of the singers, kudos to the conductor, and kudos to everyone involved in this production of Don Carlo. Well, I hope you enjoy this review. If you disagree or agree with me in certain areas, it's okay. Feel free to express your thoughts as well. So without further ado, I wish you all a good night.